Welcome into SEC Primetime Live here on the Voice of College Football. Andrew Miller, Tucker Harlan, and for the first time, and it feels like forever, the guy who started this, Josh Mahler, back on the show. Long time no see.
Yeah. I feel like it's been just hectic. It's been busy trying to cover Oklahoma plus SEC and then do my day job on top of it. But it's good to be back.
Yeah, glad to have you back a part of the program. We're going three wide tonight, so that should be a lot of fun. And we got some fun stuff to get into. Obviously, big weekend in the SEC with a couple really high-profile matchups when we talk about Oklahoma going to Alabama, Texas going to Georgia, two games that are absolutely massive for the SEC championship race, for the college football playoff race. But we want to talk a little bit about the playoff here to start off the show. What is the path to the playoff for a lot of these teams within the SEC? And what we've done is we've taken the 7 teams in the league that ESPN's playoff predictor give a somewhat reasonable chance of still getting to the postseason. And we're going to break down, we think, what their path is to get there. What do they have to do to secure a bid to the playoff? And how likely do we think that is of happening? But to start off with, we should probably start with what the playoff field currently is. If you're not up on that just yet, so let me pull that up right now. And this was released just yesterday evening. The latest college football playoff projection. These are the 12 teams that would be in the playoff right now, including, 1, 2, 3, 4 from 5 from the SEC at the moment. Texas A&M and Alabama receiving first-round buys. A&M the 3 seed, Alabama the 4. We have Georgia as the 5 taking on 12 seed USF in the first round. Texas and Ole Miss meeting up in this thing as a 10-7 matchup in Oxford. The winner of that game would go on to face Indiana. The winner of Georgia-South Florida would go on to face Alabama. So that's what they currently have. Whether or not they would actually keep the conference matchups in the first round, we'll see. Obviously, Texas and Ole Miss are not playing each other this year, so you wouldn't have a rematch there. But Bama-Georgia is a game we've already seen. Do you want to have that game in the second round? I know they say they don't push around those matchups when they've already happened, but let's be real. They definitely try to avoid rematches if they can. But that's the current bracket at the moment. But those aren't the only teams that are in the mix. Oklahoma still very much in the mix. Vanderbilt still got a little bit of a shot there. So let's go through these teams. And what I did was I took ESPN's playoff predictor, just what the percentage is of these teams to get into the field. We've got look at their resume, we'll look at their schedule. And interestingly enough, even though Texas A&M is the higher seeded team, the playoff predictor gives Alabama just a slightly higher percent chance of getting in. Number 4 Alabama with a 96% chance of reaching the playoff. They're 4th in FPI, 4th in strength of record, 6th in strength of schedule. Some tough games coming up. Obviously, Oklahoma this weekend. We'll talk a lot about that game later. They get the little, effectively a bye week with Eastern Illinois coming into town, and then the Iron Bowl to end the season. You can never just count that as a win. Look, they've got good ranked wins at this point between Georgia, Vanderbilt, Tennessee. The one loss is iffy with Florida State, but it was on the road week 1 of the season. The Tide looked to be in a good spot. Josh, I'll start with you here. If they get one more win, obviously we'll assume a win over Eastern Illinois. If they get one between Oklahoma and Auburn, do you think they're locked into this thing?
Yeah, I think it seems pretty obvious to me. I think Alabama's pretty much a shoe-in for it. I think they beat at least Illinois. What was the Illinois team that they're going against?
Eastern Illinois.
Eastern Illinois. I almost said Illinois State. So yeah, Eastern Illinois, obviously, and then Auburn should be a win, right? And then that Oklahoma one, we'll talk more about it later, like you said. So I don't want to get too far into that one, but ultimately for Alabama, I think the reason why they have kind of a little bit more of a favorable chance to get in over even an A&M who's currently undefeated is because of the opponents that they go against. Not to try to knock on my Sooners or anything, but that's a pretty favorable schedule for Alabama, where they're favored in all 3 of those games coming up. Where Texas A&M still having to face Texas and South Carolina. They've got a tough one there against Texas, but ultimately I think Alabama is pretty much a lock in unless they were to lose Auburn and Oklahoma. Then they're probably obviously out. But a 10-2 easily gets them in.
Tucker, you in agreement on that?
Yeah, first and foremost, shout out to the Fighting Tony Romos and Jimmy Garoppolo's up there.
I was thinking it, almost said it.
Yeah, that's who went there. That's their more notable alumni. Actually, I think I had a buddy, his my friend's mom went there to Eastern Illinois. He's from Chicago originally, so there are some connections there. They're just few and far between at Eastern Illinois, but I do think the resume that Texas A&M has compared to Alabama, it kind of pales in comparison, to be honest, just because You look around at what Texas A&M has done on the schedule so far. The win at Notre Dame is impressive. That's probably going to stand out as their best win this season. I mean, you look at the home games this year; they're not all that strong of home wins. I mean, you're looking at a scenario in which Mississippi State has the best record of any team they beat at home. That's a Power 4 team, which look, Mississippi State could get into a bowl game this year, but that feels like the extent of it. Like they're not going to have a really significant home win outside of that game. So, and then Mizzou without Bo Pribula, like, do they factor that in? Does the committee factor that in when looking at this stuff? But the good news is, you not to get too far in, like Josh said, the games this week, but you got a team in South Carolina coming in there that you would think they favor Texas A&M to win, and then they got another one of those fluffy cupcake games against Samford, who just fired their coach in week 14. So you'll have a favorable schedule to get in, but the resume is not quite as strong as what we've seen from Alabama so far. And Alabama, too, went on that run of beating up on ranked opponents for, 4 or 5 weeks in a row without a bye week in between them. So a bit impressive what Alabama's been able to do. I think they have the tougher schedule down the stretch than Texas A&M, but I do like the Tide's chance to get into the college football playoff.
Yeah, I do think the resume is part of the reason why Alabama's percentages are probably just a little bit higher. I mean, it's literally 1 percentage point, 96 versus 95. But they've got more impressive wins at this point. Like you talked about Notre Dame, as we'll talk about the Aggies here just in a sec. That's the only ranked win they currently have on the resume based on the current rankings. I think we're all in agreement. Bama is in great position. Do we all think they're going to get into this thing?
Yeah, for sure.
I think so.
Yeah, we'll write the Tide in as one playoff team for the SEC. Now the aforementioned Aggies, 95%, according to the playoff predictor. Number 3 currently. They're 7th in FPI, 15th in strength of schedule. Now, actually, number 1 in strength of record, according to the FBI's metrics. So, giving them a lot of credit for what they have achieved. But as we mentioned, only the 1 ranked win to this point. Haven't taken a loss, though, and that counts for plenty. And we already talked about it. The remaining schedule. South Carolina at home. It's a very different team if you're playing them in Williams-Brice, but the Gamecocks are not a very good team this season. Samford, who just fired their coach, shout out to Chris Hatcher, and on the road at number 10 Texas to end the season. Longhorns look tougher at this point, but here's a question. We assume they're going to beat Samford, and if they get one of the other two, they're definitely in. Could Texas A&M at 10-2, if they lost to both South Carolina and Texas, with only having the Notre Dame win, do you think they could still get in this thing? Or would they still get in?
Yeah, I think it's going to be tough. If they were to lose 2 games now, just because it's at the end of the season, and at this point we're still sitting here where you could have 5 or 6 teams in the SEC sit there at 10-2. So I think that would kind of depend on who else is sitting there at 10-2. Yeah, I mean it's a really tough situation that we're in right now, but I think that they're pretty much a lock in. I think even with 2 losses, they should make it in. But it's just hard to know who else is sitting there at 10-2.
Yeah, it's going to be tough for them to get in if they were to lose those games for sure. I will say this: history is on the side of the Aggies. The Gamecocks have not won in College Station since the Aggies joined the SEC, and they've been playing every year since 2014. And this doesn't feel like a year that they would do that. But yeah, if you go 1-2 down the stretch, and it is going to depend a little bit on what the rest of these conferences do. Like there's still a couple of 1-loss teams in the Big 12, as we know. ACC, it's hard to say if they would get more than 1 in there. And then there's the whole Notre Dame factor. But if games matter, then you would assume that they put Texas A&M in over Notre Dame. But, sometimes the College Football Playoff Committee, as we saw with Tennessee getting stuck behind Alabama in 2022, has this whole recency bias thing in mind. So, 10-2 feels like it has to be safe most years. I don't know if it is this year, though. You got a lot of teams that have managed to at least try to play their way into that 10-2 conversation once we get to the end of the year.
To that point, some of the other teams you're looking at in the standings, besides SEC teams, BYU at number 12, Utah at 13, Miami at 15. Currently, we projected in as the highest-ranked ACC team, 16 Georgia Tech, 17 USC. 18 Michigan. Outside shots for a lot of those teams, but look, if you're Texas A&M and you take a couple losses down the stretch, you open the door for one of those teams if they get hot. I think the Aggies, if they beat South Carolina, you can go ahead and lock them in. At Texas, really wouldn't do anything to hurt them at this point. It would be interesting, though, if they took a loss to the Gamecocks, which, not to bury the lead, I just don't think it's going to happen. I think we're probably all in agreement, though. A&M's getting in the playoff.
Yeah.
Yeah, so there's two teams from the SEC right away. Go to Georgia, the only other SEC team with a greater than 90% chance. Number 5 currently in the rankings, 92% overall. 6th in the FPI, number 11 strength of schedule, 5th strength of record. They have ranked wins against number 23 Tennessee on the road and number 7 Ole Miss. 1 loss to number 4 Alabama. Game at home, but still, you're not going to have an issue with that loss. Tough schedule remaining, though. That is something to look at. They have number 10 Texas this weekend at home. Charlotte in between, but then on the road, kind of. They're playing in the Georgia or Mercedes-Benz against number 16 Georgia Tech. But the Yellow Jackets are a good team that pushed them around last year, and it was a competitive game. It's a tough path the rest of the way, but Georgia's in a position they probably can afford a loss, I would think, and still get in this thing.
Yeah, I think Georgia seems solid enough. Even with one more loss here on the season, here closing it out, their wins are just so good. You got wins against Ole Miss. I think that Ole Miss win was one of the better ones for them. And so I think just their overall resume, the fact that they're able to close games out, they're able to find a way to win, and it just seems like they're so adaptable to just about every game that they've ever been in this season. And then not only that, but I believe they've won the last 17 November games in Sanford Stadium. So I mean, if history repeats itself, they're gonna win out. They're gonna end up going, even if they don't make it or win the SEC. Even sitting there at 10-2, I think Georgia's got a good enough resume to get them in.
Yeah, it's hard to say with this Georgia team if they can stop flirting with some of their opponents early on in games, if that is actually a good thing that they've been in the tight scenarios.
They didn't do it last week.
They did not do it last week, with the exception of your Mississippi State Bulldogs, Andrew. They have flirted with disaster a few too many times. And I think back to that 2014 Florida State team with Jameis Winston, where they were down in several of their games at halftime, late into games that year. And then they came back and won all of those games in the regular season and then against Georgia Tech in the ACC championship. Well, what do you know? They get down to Oregon at halftime and the Rose Bowl, and you're thinking, oh, maybe history can repeat itself. Nope. Marcus Mariota won that game 59-20 for the Ducks that day. So I have to wonder if there will be a point in time in which this comes back to haunt Georgia. I don't know if it's in this last little stretch. And again, not going to get into the Texas game too much, but we know that defense can play hard. It's probably going to be the best defense Georgia sees all season. And then, Andrew, you mentioned it too with Georgia Tech. That's a team that is going to scrap and claw its way into a close game with you. It did last season against Georgia. You have to think they've been thinking about what happened that night all season long to this point. So I would not be surprised if Georgia wins out, but it is a tough road. It's a much tougher road than a lot of these teams that are trying to get into the college football playoff.
And I will say, and not to overreact to how they performed in Starkville, but I did think there was part of that was Georgia playing really well and not just Mississippi State having a bad day. Look, if that Georgia team does finally put it all together and starts getting more consistent, then they become a much bigger threat. I think Ohio State's still the team to beat across college football, but Georgia at their best is a team that can definitely play with almost anybody in the country. It's going to be a challenge the rest of the way, but getting Texas at home is big. Georgia Tech, they took over Bobby Dodd when it was in Bobby Dodd anyway. Now Mercedes-Benz, it's even more of a neutral site for them. I mean, they're effectively playing home games the last 3 weeks of the season, if we're being completely honest here. They've got the good wins. The only loss, you don't see them taking a loss that's not going to be bad. Look, if it's 2 losses, it's probably lights out on them just because 9-3 is tough. Although, look, the strength of schedule is pretty good, strength of record good, and the strength of schedule is only going to go up with these last couple of games. But I think if Georgia's another team. You get one more win here, they're in the field. And that's kind of been the theme here with these teams at the top, which is why the percentages are so high. And this next team we'll get to, Ole Miss, still in a really good position where one more win probably does it for them. Number 7 right now in the rankings, 80% chance, according to the playoff predictor. They're 12th in FPI, 32nd in strength of schedule. That must be nice. Strength of record of number 6 for the Rebels. Remaining schedule, a Florida team that has quit on the season. They get a bye week, and then they go to Starkville for the Egg Bowl to end the year. Have the one win at Oklahoma that has aged really well. I mean, I'll be honest, when they got that win, I kind of thought, all right, is OU about to start fading? But then OU goes to Knoxville and gets the win. So that win has aged better. That's going to be a ranked win when it's all said and done. The loss, number 5, Georgia. I kind of think Ole Miss is another team. If they take care of business this weekend, even with the strength of schedule being what it is, a 10-2 SEC team, if the other loss is to Mississippi State, which would mean the Bulldogs are going bowling on the road, that's not the worst thing in the world. One more win gets it done for them.
Yeah, I think so. I think it's another one of those top teams in the SEC, and I just don't see. I really think that there's going to be for sure 4, possibly 5 in the college football playoffs from the SEC, and I don't like that. I don't like one conference getting all the love and all the attention. But they're just, you look at these teams, and it's hard to sit here and try to compare any of these teams that we just mentioned against a Michigan or really even an Oregon right now. I feel like Oregon just doesn't look the same, as they have. Or you jump over to the ACC, and I don't think there's really anybody that you really compare. I don't even think Miami compares. And I think they've kind of had their struggles here towards the end where they have been favored. So Ole Miss being another one of those teams. Correct me if I'm wrong. Just Florida, Mississippi State left on their schedule.
Yeah, bye week in between.
Yeah, so I think this is going to be just fine. They don't play really any top teams, so as long as they handle business as they should, I think they're going to be in with no question. But even one loss against either one of those teams still doesn't knock you out, in my opinion.
Yeah, just find it funny that Josh said he doesn't like it when one conference gets all the love, and the Sooners went 6-12 in basketball in the SEC last year and made the NCAA tournaments. But you take what you can get if the narrative is in your favor. I think Ole Miss is a team that is gonna have to just split the rest of the way at the very least. I don't see them losing either of those 2 games. Just with the fact that the Egg Bowl is in broad daylight this year, I don't see a way that game gets too silly this time around. Usually if it's at night or if it's on Thanksgiving in particular, then I can see it getting silly. But no, it's Black Friday in the middle of the day. It's not happening this year. But you look at the schedule, and I figured this was a year, even though they lost a lot of pieces from last season, that Ole Miss, just with the schedule it had this season, looking at all the teams that came to Oxford this year that were teams that, did some good things last year, but you weren't entirely sure about them going into this season. Like Florida and South Carolina are great examples of those. And you're able to capitalize with one of those 2. We'll see what happens with Florida this weekend. And I figured their 2 toughest games on the schedule would have been Georgia and Oklahoma. They go 1-1 in those games, and they have done everything else they need to do at this point. So you have to really like Ole Miss's odds to get in, and honestly, I think they have the easiest path left of anybody in the SEC to get in, just because you have one. For one, it's just 2 games, and then two teams that have not been at the top of the top in the SEC this year.
Yeah, I mean, to be a hater, because I need to be, like, they have lucked out a little bit. Some of the games on the schedule you thought would have been more difficult have ended up not being very good teams. But to their credit, the opportunities they got, they were right there on the road with Georgia, really could have won that football game. And then you go on the road against Oklahoma and you get a good win. So, I can roll my eyes at the strength of schedule of the rival all I want, but the reality is they are finding ways to win football games. And I would say they've been better over the last month of the season too. I thought for the first few months of the season, because you talked about all the new pieces, there was a lot of kind of getting away with it where they were finding ways to win games and maybe it was not the most impressive along the way. They've been playing better as of late as well. So this is a team that is getting better at the right time. And yeah, I mean, Florida, I think they're probably going to win that game by a lot. We'll see how the Egg Bowl goes. I'm not overly confident, even as a State fan, going into that game. I would agree, their path is the easiest, and I think one more win certainly in this thing. we feel like 4 SEC teams for sure getting in. I know Josh already mentioned that. It feels pretty much a lock. The last 3 teams we're going to talk about, though, this is where it gets a little bit more interesting. All of them have odds below 50%. All of them have more difficult schedules remaining when you look at some of the matchups that they have. More losses to this point. But it's possible we could get one more of these teams. And currently we already have one of them projected in Texas. So we'll start with the Longhorns, number 10 in the rankings, 49% according to the playoff predictor. They are FPI number 8, strength of schedule 13th, strength of record 10th. Really tough slate the rest of the way. On the road at number 5, Georgia. Arkansas in between that. Look, they're a bad team, but Arkansas will score points. They're not a complete pushover. And then number 3, A&M at home to end the season. They got a couple good wins, getting OU and Red River and then taking down Vanderbilt at home. On the road at at Ohio State. Not at all a bad loss to open up the season. That's the best team in the country. Really, the one red flag is that they've had a lot of games that they didn't look great, and then they went on the road and lost to a Florida team that's not very good. But if that's the one thing, I mean, the problem for Texas is that you've got the 2 losses. The strength of schedule, though, is pretty good at 10, and it's only going to get better with these remaining games. Is there a realistic path of 9-3 Texas getting in the playoff?
I think there's a path, but again, it's going to fall into a lot of what's happening elsewhere. You know, how many other teams are sitting there at 9-3, 10-2. I think a 9-3 Texas could make it in over a 10-2 ACC team or even a Big 10 team, Big 12 team for sure. I think looking at those 3 conferences, I think there's a possibility that could happen. Would I agree with it? I don't know. I have to see the circumstance and see what exactly is happening. I don't think it will happen just because this is such a deep field, really across all 4 power conferences, and then especially the SEC and being included. And especially I'm just being optimistic here just for a quick moment. Let's say that Oklahoma does win out and goes 10-2, and then you've got Georgia sitting there at least 10-2. And if you end up already having 5 other teams in the SEC at 10-2, does a 6th team get in? I don't think so. And I guess my math might not be adding up with some of those 2 because maybe we wouldn't end up having that many 10-2 teams there. But I think it's very likely that Texas probably drops one of these 2 tough matchups, either at Georgia or against A&M, or maybe they overlook Arkansas and that's the one they drop. And everyone's like, what the heck happened there? Why did they drop that one and then beat Georgia on the road and beat A&M? How did that happen? I could see that happening as well. I mean, it happened with Florida. I think they overlooked Florida and were looking onto that Red River game and ended up dropping the game to Florida. So I don't think a 9-3 team makes it in at all this year. And I think before the season, before it started, I was saying, man, with Oklahoma's possible strength of schedule there, I thought for sure 9-3 would probably get them in until you start to just see how many 10-2 teams there are, not just in the conference, but across the country. And I think 10-2 teams are going to get rewarded over a 9-3 team in most scenarios.
I'm with Josh here. You would have to do a lot of scoreboard watching, hoping and praying to get in if you were a 9-3 team this year, just because everybody at the top of these conferences has stayed far above everybody else to the point where they could get to 10 wins as we get toward the end of the season now. And I look here at the end of the schedule. You would think they beat Arkansas, but the other 2 games, I don't know if I can go there. And, at the beginning of the season, I was like, I'm not sure this is 100% going to happen, but there exists an alternate reality, or a reality, I guess, as we are approaching a point in the season where it could happen, where Texas is sitting at 8-4 to end the season. I thought 3-3 through the first 3 was a possibility. They lost to Ohio State and Florida, but they do get it done against Oklahoma, so they avoid it there. But you look at what's left on the schedule, it's like they could very easily find their way to 8-4, and I don't trust that offense right now at all. Like, that was the thing that let this team down last season was you were able to run the ball well and you could utilize your screen game, but overall Quinn Ewers was a weakness, and Steve Spurrier hit the nail on the head. If Arch Manning is really that good, why isn't he playing over Quinn Ewers? And we're seeing why. So I don't feel like they get in at this point.
I want to agree with the two of you, but I got a feeling Texas is finding a way to end up in this thing. Like, I will
I
say,
agree.
I do think their offense has been performing better the last few weeks. I think Art is kind of starting to figure it out, just personally. There's something about that A&M game being in Austin kind of leads me to think that Texas A&M is going to do it. I mean, even if it were in College Station, I know they had. Look, last year was the first time in years, but we kind of know how that rivalry tends to go, and A&M finds ways to lose that game to Texas. And I think this A&M team is really good, but I think Texas is going to have a good shot there. I actually do think they have it in Athens. I lean Georgia, and again, we'll break down that game later, but I think they got an opportunity there. So I think winning out is not completely out of the question. If they do that, obviously they're in the thing. If they win out, they might be going. They're going to go to the SEC championship game because they would have the wins over Georgia and A&M. So then you're locked in for sure.
Well, and to your point too, I think some of this falls back on how we know that the committee reacts to things. And let's say they were to go on the road and lose a close one to Georgia, but then they turn around and dominate Arkansas as they should, and then go in there and beat Texas A&M. I can see where that recency bias is kind of running around their heads, where they just beat Texas A&M, who was possibly undefeated at that point coming into that game. And so I agree with you to the point that I know how this committee is going to react to those last two wins, to know that those could bump Texas up high enough just to give them enough of a boost to get them in at 9-3. But I don't think it should happen. But I do agree with you that it could happen.
And some of it for me is also, one, I do think what happened last year with the SEC raising such a fuss and the constant conversation, I don't think this should be the case, but I think that's going to play a role where SEC teams that may otherwise be borderline might get nudged in. And again, I do not like that for college football. I am not a pro SEC person, even as we're sitting here on an SEC show. But I have a feeling that might happen. But then also, we talk about the landscape nationally and some of these other teams. The ACC, I think, it's one team. I don't think they're getting multiple bids into this thing. And the Big 12, it might only be one, because if they get a scenario where, right now it looks like it's going to be Texas Tech and BYU probably is the two teams that play. Well, if Tech wins that game again, BYU will have lost twice to the same team. Are they going to put them in? I don't know. And it feels like there's just which we have to consider the Big Ten as well, but it feels like some of those teams in the Big Ten, outside of the ones at the top, it feels like we're questioning them a lot more than normal. This is a situation where I don't know if there's as many teams we're looking at as we're saying, yeah, for sure that team should be in. I will still lean. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, in the Big Ten, a lot of those teams are playing against each other, which could knock a lot of those possible contenders out.
Absolutely. I will lean they're not going to do it just because I don't think they're going to win out. And it's more likely that they were to lose both of those last two games than maybe even get one of them. I don't know what the exact odds would be on that. But I think there's very much a path for Texas. If they're 9-3 in this thing, they are going to have an argument, whether we like it or not. Go to the Oklahoma Sooners, currently on the outside looking in. I think the first team out of the field, number 11 in the rankings, 24% chance. FPI at number 14, strength of schedule 16, strength of record 12. Tough remaining schedule. You got to go on the road at number 4, Alabama. But then the last two games at home and kind of feel manageable. Two teams that are no longer what they were, a month ago with Missouri and LSU. You got ranked wins at number 18, Michigan, and at number 23, Tennessee. So not like wins that stand out a ton, but it's road games against good teams. Your losses are both to top 10 opponents in Texas and Ole Miss. What are your thoughts here, Josh? We'll let you hit your team.
Yeah, I think Oklahoma is in the situation where they control their own destiny. You have to win out, and it was that way even here just a couple weekends ago whenever they went, on the road to Knoxville. You hold your own destiny, but you have to win the next game. And, they had this bye week to kind of rest up and really focus on Alabama. If they win out, I think there's no doubt they're one of those teams. Based on where they're ranked, they're going to make it in the college football playoffs. And I think the committee made that very clear just on the first playoff ranking that they put out there, putting them at number 12. And then now this week after the bye week, bumping them up and moving BYU down the list after the loss against Tech. So I think Oklahoma's in. They just have to win out. They lose one, then we fall to the scenario of 9-3 is just not going to cut it. And let's say, okay, they were to win on the road in Tuscaloosa and still finish 9-3. Do they make it in then? Well, they do have some good wins on the road, but then you're talking 2 home losses, and one of those home losses now being against either a Missouri or LSU. And like you mentioned, neither of those two teams have that same umph that they did at the beginning of the season. And so then that kind of bumps Oklahoma out. So I just don't think there's a scenario anymore where Oklahoma makes it in at 9-3, but win out and you're in. I think the playoff committee has made that very clear at this point.
And I will say real quick, we make the point about what if you were to beat Alabama but then lose to Missouri LSU. I kind of brushed over it with Texas, where one of those losses is Florida. And perhaps that it could be a similar situation to what we saw a year ago, where you look at Texas and it's like, yeah, okay, you have the wins and most of your losses are fine, but we can't overlook that loss to Florida. We can't say it's a strength of schedule reason you went 9-3 when you lose to a Florida team. The same thing could be happening to Oklahoma here. So definitely feel safe. It's going to be a win out. Tucker, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, so this game this weekend is going to be the most important game that Oklahoma has left on the schedule. Now, that's not to say you should overlook Mizzou and LSU, but if you can get it done in Tuscaloosa, suddenly you feel very good about your shot to get in. Now, if what he's saying, and if you lose to either Mizzou or LSU in the event that happens, that suddenly puts you in a situation similar to Texas, where, if they are, if you're comparing the two of them, obviously there's the head-to-head victory for Texas if the committee actually believes in results, which it doesn't always for some reason. You have that, and then it's just the fact that, which loss is considered worse at that point. Do you have Texas's loss at Florida that is considered worse, or one of these home losses for Oklahoma, hypothetical home losses for Oklahoma? And again, if they're both 9-3, if they do the right thing, you have to put Texas in just because there's a head-to-head result there. So I don't love Oklahoma's shot to get in just to begin with. Like if you lose this game this weekend at Alabama, I think you're just writing it off completely. But you win that game, and all of a sudden you realize you can get in.
I think it's going to be tough for the Sooners, and it really does hinge on this weekend. And, I mean, again, we're going to preview it later, but I feel like Alabama's probably winning that game, so I would lean towards Oklahoma's probably not in this thing. But they win this game, then you're very much right there, and it's like, okay, as Shaw said, control your own destiny. And to be in that position at this point, good place to be in. We'll close up with Vanderbilt, number 14 in the rankings, 16% chance to make the playoff according to the predictor. They're 16th in the FPI. Strength of schedule 21st, so not all that impressive, but okay. Strength of record at 11, though. Remaining schedule, they have a bye week this week. Then it's Kentucky and finish with number 23, Tennessee. They do not currently have a ranked win. That win over Missouri, no longer working out for them. The win over LSU, no longer working out for them. The losses, both the top 10 teams on the road between Alabama and Texas. So, you can't really say anything there. What hurts Vandy is the lack of quality wins. And, the frustrating thing for them here is if they win out, that Tennessee game is not going to be a ranked win when it's all said and done, with Duval sitting at number 23 currently. Maybe if Mizzou was able to figure a few things out the rest of the way, they could maybe sneak back into the rankings, but it's going to be tough. Vandy is the one team, and I hate to do it to them because it just feels like you're picking on Vanderbilt, but they kind of feel like the one SEC team that even at 10-2 may not be able to get in this thing.
Yeah, I agree with you, and I was even just trying to look through it too and see their schedule a little bit more. I'm not really sure that a 10-2 Vanderbilt would even make it in over a 9-3 Texas, mainly because of that head-to-head matchup. Now, I do think Vanderbilt made a much more of a closer game there towards the end, and you can make that argument. But I think the committee would look at it, and that's given if Texas were to lose a close one on the road at Georgia. Outside of that, I don't know. I'm not super sold on Vanderbilt. Not only that, but I'm not really sure that Vanderbilt really ends up closing out the rest of their season undefeated. Who knows what happens against Kentucky? I guess that's one of those weird teams that just sneaks up on you for no reason at all. But I think they probably handle business there. I think that the Tennessee game is really where it's going to hinge for them. And I like Tennessee. I think they're going to be able to find a way to pull that one out. Maybe my mind changes as we get closer to that game. But yeah, I agree with you, though. Even at a 10-2, I'm still sitting there looking at Vandy, wondering if the committee is going to look at that logo and just say, I'm not feeling it.
Yeah, there's some logo bias involved here with Notre Dame getting in right now over Vanderbilt with the rankings from the committee that we've seen, or at least being placed ahead in those rankings. And, Notre Dame, they had the 2 losses at the beginning of the season, but they haven't really beaten anyone of significance since. And I mean, it's essentially the same thing that Vanderbilt has done here too. And, it's funny because they're having this great season that they haven't had in so long. And yet it's still them just feasting on other major programs when they're down, like with Auburn and LSU going in there and losing when they've both fired coaches. South Carolina not exactly happy with their guy. Virginia Tech on the road, they fired their coach a week later after getting blasted by Old Dominion. So there's you have to hope a little bit more if you were to go 10-2. If you're Vanderbilt, I do think they get it done against Kentucky here in a couple of weeks, just because I think they're a little bit more motivated than, say, Auburn or Florida, because they haven't had to fire a coach yet. But that Tennessee game is really interesting because Tennessee, come to think of it, has not really been in a situation in this college football playoff era where it has been able to play the role of spoiler, because in Georgia, I guess you could have said that they could have tried and spoiled it for Georgia last season down there in Athens, but we all know that probably wasn't going to happen just with Nico not 100% in that game and the fact that it was a night game in Athens. But it's not often that you see a Tennessee team that's potentially able to play spoiler like this one is this year. And that could be a fun thing for the fans, I think, in Neyland Stadium, because you see that in the NFL from time to time. Like, I know there was a time a few years ago when the Packers hosted, I believe it was the Lions the last week of the season, and then the Lions spoiled the season right then and there. So, Tennessee fans would love to do that and keep Vandy in its place.
Yeah, the comparison to Notre Dame is honestly pretty fair. Look, the Irish do have a couple ranked wins currently they have one with USC, and then they could get a second if they beat Pitt, but if they beat Pitt, will Pitt still be ranked? So the logo bias is very much a real thing. And that is where Vanderbilt's kind of one of the few SEC teams that may not get the SEC push, even at 10-2. Kind of feels like it's weird because the remaining schedule is somewhat favorable, even with the Tennessee game there. But it feels like the odds are just not super high of them ultimately getting in this thing. We're in agreement that we'll, for sure, 4 teams, and it's the 4 that all have 80% chances of getting in, 80+%. If I were to set the over/under at 4.5, are you going over or are you going under?
I'm probably going, man, I don't know. I would, that's a really tough line. Just because, again, it kind of depends on what else shakes up. I'm going to say over. I'm going to say there's one of these teams that isn't supposed to lose one of their games coming up, whether it be maybe Notre Dame taking on Pitt this weekend, or maybe I don't know, if you look at maybe the Big 12 teams that are competing, maybe Miami drops another one. Who knows? I'm gonna bank on maybe one of these other conferences not performing well and getting one less team in, and then you have maybe one extra 10-2 team slip in there from the SEC, or maybe even a 9-3 team like Texas or possibly Oklahoma. I'll throw them in there just because.
See, I'd agree with Josh, but Notre Dame is not a must-win game for Pittsburgh, so
it obviously isn't.
Yeah, apparently it's not. So
what a way to win over your own fan base. Just great work.
Well, and you annoyed me, and I'm not even a Pitt fan. Like, what are you saying?
Pat Narduzzi is a master at annoying everyone.
Yeah, he annoyed the Tennessee fans a few years ago when Tennessee had that home and home going. It's just so hard. Like, Vanderbilt is the team that I could see getting in as the 5th team if there were to be a 5th team, just because of the record, if they were to win out here down the stretch. I'm just not as confident in Texas and Oklahoma, just because we know they still have tough road games this weekend. Now, if they're to win those road games, then you could stretch that even higher. But for right now, I am probably going to have to go with the under Check with me after what is probably going to be a bloodbath in the swamp from Tennessee.
I'm going to go over. And look, currently 5 teams projected in. It's going to be the 4 at the top for sure. But I'm with Josh. I think one of those 3, even as I was talking about Vanderbilt as a 10-win team from the SEC, may not get the benefit of the doubt. It just feels like the rest of the sport is not getting a ton of respect right now. And I'm not necessarily saying it's unwarranted because, again, a lot of these teams feel severely flawed. A lot of these SEC teams feel severely flawed, but I feel like if it's 2 flawed teams, the SEC bias is probably going to win out a little bit. I think it'll be 5 SEC teams in the playoff when it's all said and done.
Well, I think that scenario too. Let's kind of go down that list. So Texas A&M, let's say that they lose the 1 to Texas in this scenario, and then Bama loses 1 to Oklahoma, and Georgia loses 1 to Texas in this whole scenario, but they still make it in. Ole Miss wins out, and then you've got Texas who then won out to beat Georgia and Texas A&M to get their way in. That's your 5th team, and then Oklahoma with a 6th team being 10-2. What if that scenario all plays out and you've got 6 10-2 teams? I look at this. It could be a really messy shakeup where the committee really has to look at it and try their hardest not to be this SEC bias that everyone wants to talk about, but to be honest with yourselves, like you just saw all these top teams kind of face off against each other with Oklahoma, Alabama, Texas, Georgia, Texas A&M. That was a really fun stretch to watch for the committee. And you're sitting here thinking like, man, all these teams played like playoff teams. How do we keep 6 of these teams out of the playoffs? I think this is just a really interesting shakeup if all of this were to play out.
You could have 7 because Vanderbilt does not play any of those teams the rest of the way. Now,
exactly,
obviously,
you could.
They've got the head-to-head losses to Bama and Texas. They would be the odd man out for sure. But you're right. Like, you could have 6 of these teams that are all 10-2 with a couple 11-1s in there, and the results kind of contradict each other across the board. It could be very messy, as you said, come Selection Sunday. So this is going to be a fun race to watch over these final few weeks. Obviously, a couple big games that are going to impact that race quite a bit here this weekend. So let's go ahead and get into the Week 12 preview. A couple games we're not going to spend much on. Tennessee Tech at Kentucky, although Tucker did point out going into this is the 10-0 Tennessee Tech team. So
would be quite the swing. Would be quite the swing for beating Florida for the 5th time in 6 years.
Don't overlook are they
the mighty Golden Eagles?
There we go. I knew they were a bird. Tennessee Tech, I know 1 year in baseball they went into Oxford and knocked out Ole Miss in their own regional. So I appreciate that.
They beat several Vitello teams in midweek games. It's happened. So don't ever underestimate the Golden Eagles.
You've been warned, Kentucky. We will let you, Tucker, real quick. Do you have any thoughts? New Mexico State taking on your Volunteers.
Yeah, obviously Tennessee's going to win the game, probably going to win big. I know the spread is 40.5 right now. It's a question of whether or not they cover and how Josh Heupel manages this football game. And I'm not talking as in clock management late in the game, which is a whole other can of worms that has been problematic this year. But what does he want to do? Does he want to run the football and just get out of there and move on to the game against Florida next week? Or is this somewhat of a quarterback competition for 2026 between Jake Merklinger and George McIntyre? We will have to see. So that's kind of what I'm looking for in this game, just which one of those guys emerges, if that is how they are going to let it play out. But if not, and if they just run the ball and just try and get out of there, then yeah, Tennessee will take care of business. Only question is whether or not they cover that 40.5.
There you go. We'll save the best games for the end of the show. So Oklahoma, Alabama, Texas, Georgia. That's how we'll close things out. The other 4 games within the conference, we will start with South Carolina taking on number 3 Texas A&M. That game at 11 a.m. Central Time on ESPN. The Aggies are, and I'm going off of ESPN's odds here, 19.5-point favorite, over under of 47.5. Josh, does A&M just roll here, or could South Carolina make this interesting?
I think South Carolina could make it interesting. I just don't think they will. They've looked atrocious here, especially in the back end of this season. I think, can South Carolina's defense force some turnovers maybe? Can they come in here and catch the Texas A&M team off guard and force some turnovers to make this a little bit of a game? That's the only way I really see it. Ultimately, I think Texas A&M probably wins this one big. I'm going to throw a score prediction in there, maybe 34-13, something like that. I think Texas A&M handles business just fine.
Yeah, Gamecocks have not kept it within single digits out there, I believe, in 8 years now, going back to 2017. Sumlin's last year on the job there at Texas A&M. This one, because we've talked in the past about how Shane Beamer's whole thing is defense and special teams in particular, but Texas A&M is good enough on special teams to where I think it could neutralize that a little bit, like they've been able to utilize the return game some this year. And I think – I'm not going to say that can hurt South Carolina necessarily, but that is something that, they try to take advantage of, but I don't think they'll be able to in this game. But it's a matter of whether or not they can wreak havoc on that Texas A&M offense, which has played well all season. Marcel Reed has really come a long way, both as a runner, but also as a passer this season. He looks much more comfortable throwing the football this year as opposed to last year. But, yeah, I'm with Josh here. I don't think Texas A&M has too much trouble in this one.
And I'm looking at what South Carolina's done too. I was looking up just to see how many they've lost here. So they've lost 4 straight and lost 6 of their last 7. That's a terrible season for a team that a lot of people had going to the playoffs. A lot of people said for SEC and even national championship contenders. So very shocking end of the season here for the Gamecocks.
I think this is a bad matchup for South Carolina. Most weeks are a bad matchup for them, but the Gamecocks defensively, the only time they've done a good job stopping the run recently was against an Alabama team that, look, it's a very good team, but Alabama does not run the football well. If you look at these other games that have been run on, A&M is one of the best rushing attacks in the SEC. South Carolina's offensive line is horrific. Texas A&M is a great pass rush. I think the Aggies are able to feast in College Station, win this game with ease. Next game on the docket that we'll talk about, Arkansas at LSU, 11:45 a.m. on the SEC Network. Look at that. LSU actually can play a home game in the morning. It's incredible. Tigers 5.5-point favorite, over under 56.5. What are y'all's thoughts?
Not a whole lot here. I guess I just don't really care what happens in that game. But I feel like LSU – I feel like they could come out here in the last few games of this season and put together something, just a fight. But I think there's just so much drama going on in the background right now, and I don't know. I guess Arkansas is really in the same situation, so I really have no clue where this game could go. Who did you say was the favorite in this game?
LSU was a 5.5-point favorite.
Okay, well, I'll go with the favorites. I was kind of picking LSU beforehand anyways, but I'll go ahead and go with what Vegas thinks. I just think this is going to be a sloppy game. I don't think it's going to be a fun game to watch for any fans unless you're just in for watching Pee Wee football, two teams whoop up on each other in many different ways. I just think that this is going to be an unorganized game, in my opinion.
I love Pee Wee football. Don't hate on it. I'm definitely going to be watching this game just because of how messy everything is there. Because you're going to have bad on bad with that LSU offense playing against the Arkansas defense. But, the Arkansas offense, we've seen it produce all season. Yeah. You're going against what is a pretty tough LSU defense this season. So I do think that will be a bit of a tough matchup. Odd stat for you, the last 2 times that Arkansas has won against LSU, they've both been in Baton Rouge, one of which is in the last 5 years with Sam Pittman getting it done against Coach O's last LSU team. That was KJ Jefferson, that team that got it done down there. Again, it's just a matter of whose situation is messier. Can Arkansas finally find a way to win a game here in SEC play after losing for so long, or is this whole debacle with LSU and the governor and all these other people just going to create too much of a mess? I don't know. I think LSU probably wins, but I do expect it to be close. These two teams do like to play each other close.
I'm kind of leaning Arkansas a little bit. Look, I know LSU's defense has been pretty good this season, but the better offenses they faced, especially the ones that are able to run the football, have given them problems, and Arkansas can run the football well. Their passing attack is very good also. I think they're going to be able to attack. I also think LSU, there's probably some letdown after, they clearly put a ton of effort into that game in Tuscaloosa last week. Coming back home against an Arkansas team that is still fighting to try to get a win and make something happen down the stretch. I know Arkansas's defense is a train wreck, but LSU's offense hasn't looked much better. And while I typically would say trust a bad offense against a bad defense, that hasn't always played out this season from what I've seen so far. So, look, I don't know if the Hogs ultimately win. Also, don't know if Garrett Nussmeier is going to be the quarterback. It might be Michael Van Buren getting the start at this point. I haven't seen any reports on that. I just know he came in for him. Nussmeier got benched. I think the Hogs cover that spread. I think LSU's probably done for the rest of the season. We already said we're not going to talk about Tennessee Tech, Kentucky. Florida at number 7, Ole Miss. The Gators have, and basically it's an opt-out sheet. I mean, at this point, that is a mile long of all the guys who are not playing in this game. There is obviously the narrative around the game with Kiffin in Florida. Could that be a thing? Obviously, Florida last year ruined Ole Miss's season there late in the year. So there's different vibes for different reasons here, but I kind of feel like Ole Miss probably handles business.
Yeah, I agree. I think they go in there and do exactly what they need to do. And my stance for Lane Kiffin has kind of been the same the entire time. I don't think he's going anywhere. I don't really know why he would. The other two jobs, the brand is bigger, but what he has in Ole Miss is just kind of special. And I think he's going to win out and win big here this weekend, just to kind of prove that. He kind of had a little bit of a message for the Ole Miss fans there after beating Oklahoma, because a lot of that news started breaking out. Could he possibly be looking at the Florida job? And yeah, I'm sure Florida's reaching out. I'm sure LSU is reaching out. I don't know why they wouldn't. Why wouldn't you try to get in contact with him and try to pull him over? But he had a message for the fans after beating Oklahoma saying, I'm not going anywhere. And that's kind of the vibe that I get from Lane Kiffin. Anyways, off that rant, this is one of the best offenses in the nation. And Lane Kiffin is just so smooth with the way that he the way that he is as a play caller, and the way that he uses all of the kind of trickery without even being deceptive, I guess would be the way that I'd describe his offense. He's just such a great offensive mind. I think I agree with you. I think they're going to handle business. I think, isn't that a 14-point spread, something like that? 14?
Yeah, I forgot to mention the point spread on that one. 14.5 in favor of the Rebels. 53.5 is the over-under.
I think they probably cover that spread. I think Florida's just not a good team. I don't think that I know that. I think they cover the spread. I think they win big. I'm going to pick Ole Miss in this game.
Going to side with Josh here on the Lane Kiffin thing and the result of this game. Everybody is quick to say Lane Kiffin will throw his name in for the Auburn, LSU, or Florida job simply because he ditched Tennessee in the middle of the night in 2010. He has changed a lot since then. I think it's important to recognize that, and I think he's recognizing that about himself. So I don't think he's headed anywhere else. I think he enjoys Oxford quite a bit. But just looking at Florida, as you mentioned, the injuries are just piling up all over the place. And there's no coming back from a loss to Kentucky. I don't care who you are. And I don't care what year it is, if they've got 9 or 10 wins like they have under Mark Stoops in the past. Once you lose to Kentucky, it is like a black cloud over your season for the rest of the year. And I say that because all 3 Tennessee coaches that have lost to Kentucky in the last 15 years have been fired less than a year after it happened. Now, I will say this, that the quarterback situation does get dicey here because DJ Lagway, we've talked about him kind of being a boomer bust guy. If he goes out there, throws a couple interceptions in this game, maybe they try something different. Are they going to trot Tramel Jones out there to start this game, potentially, because they're not trusting Lagway? And, my worst fear is that Harrison Bailey starts this game and then inevitably starts against his old team, the Tennessee Volunteers in the Swamp, the week after that. I don't know if they cover the spread, Ole Miss, but I definitely think they win by double digits.
Yeah, you guys talked about the coaching search thing, and I would tell people to go back to last week's episode because me and Tucker, we did a little bit of coaching matchmaker, and both of us agreed we don't see Lane going anywhere. Now, I do think Lane's name will be in the mix at probably all those places because I think Jimmy Sexton, his agent, is going to make sure his name is in the mix. And I also think Lane, while he is a changed man, he's never going to pass up an opportunity to troll. I know people around Florida there's a bunch of people around Florida like deeply connected that think that's happening. I guarantee he will take them down to the last minute and then throw a big middle finger up in their face and return to Oxford. But I also don't think, even if he wants to lead on Florida, that's not going to stop him from running up the score in this one. Florida defensively, once you give up 38 points to Kentucky, Ole Miss will be able to name their number in this one. Even with the bye week looming, I don't think there's going to be any kind of letdown. They played Citadel last week. They are going to take this game seriously and make a big point to put up a big number. Maybe Jaden Ball is able to have some success running the football. The Ole Miss run D is not good, but that's the only thing Florida has on that offense. They're not going to be able to keep pace. Ole Miss big in this game. Last of the quick previews, my Mississippi State Bulldogs going on the road to Missouri, 6:45 p.m. Central Time on the SEC Network. Tigers are a 7.5-point favorite, over under 51.5. I'll hit this one quick, and then if you guys have any further thoughts, I'll turn it over to you. We did just get word Blake Shapen probable for this game after taking that hard hit against Georgia. I'll be honest, that may not be the best thing for the Bulldogs, not to knock Shapen, but just dealing with Missouri's pass rush. I would probably rather have Kamario Taylor, who can actually run around back there. I think it's a bad matchup for State. Missouri's pass rush, regardless of who's in at quarterback, is going to give State a lot of problems. That offensive line has been terrible this year, especially in pass protection. State might be able to hit a few plays to get some points on the board, but I don't think it's going to be anything consistent. Other side of the ball, I fully expect State to sell out to stop the run with Ahmad Hardy and the other running back there, and obviously a third-string quarterback. Don't think it's going to matter. State's run defense is not good at this point, especially teams that are able to run outside zone a lot, which Missouri loves to run. That has been a great scheme for tearing up the State defense. They just do not set the edge well whatsoever. I think Missouri's able to have a pretty successful day, and I think they cover this number.
Yeah, I like Missouri in this game. I'm going to be cheering for them anyways because I need them to look as good as they can whenever they come to Norman. But no, I just think that, like you mentioned, I think the matchup kind of leans towards Missouri, and especially if they can lean to what was the other running back's name?
Is it Jamal Roberts,
right? Yeah,
Roberts. Yeah. So he was the main guy last week, and Ahmad Hardy really didn't even get any touches, at least in the first half. And I think Missouri has to get both of them running and keep that workload kind of split between the two. You keep both of them healthy, keep both of them, from getting fatigued. And I think they've got a really good chance. Just don't try to get too cute with the pass game. And I think as long as you do that, I think Missouri is just fine in this matchup.
Yeah, we talked last week, Andrew, about how the Texas A&M game against Missouri would not be as intriguing because of the quarterback injury. I think that's what's going to make this game more intriguing. The fact that Mizzou is down to its third-string quarterback, and you're going to have to rely on the run game this week to try and get things going. If you're Mizzou offensively, and as you alluded to, State's run defense is not good, and I think that's going to be a big help for them. And it just depends on what State wants to do at quarterback. If Kamario Taylor if Kamario Taylor is in at quarterback, then I do think that would give State a little bit more of an advantage just because he's, quicker on his feet than Blake Shapen is. So I think that could help them if it happens. But, I've said Mississippi State could potentially pull upsets at times this year, and then they went on to blow 17-point leads and lose in overtime. So I don't trust Mississippi State to win this game.
Yeah. Totally fair. And Levy did say at the start of the week, if Shapen is healthy, he will be the quarterback. He's not going to make a change, which State fans have their feelings on that, but that's Levy's guy at this point. I'm sure Kamario Taylor will play regardless, but it feels like Shapen being probable, he's probably going to play in this game. And like I said, it's just not a great matchup for State. Feels like bowl eligibility is going to come down to the last week of the season. Let's see if they can do something in the Egg Bowl. Or maybe they prove me wrong. I would love them to this week. Getting on to the games of the week and a couple really fun ones in the SEC. Number 11, Oklahoma, on the road at number 4, Alabama. That's where we'll start. 2:30 p.m. Central Time on ABC. Alabama, a 5.5-point favorite, over under a 45.5. Josh, it's your Sooners. Why don't you go ahead and break it down for us?
It's a playoff eliminator for Oklahoma, where it's a playoff clincher for Alabama. And I think that's what makes this so fun. And I think because of the intensity of what this game means, I know Brent Venables isn't going to go into the locker room and tell the guys, hey, let's talk about rankings and let's talk about, all of the playoff and all that. But he is going to tell them, listen, this is your season on the line. Are you going to go in there and define your season for yourselves and hold your own destiny or, control your own destiny? Or are you going to let them control it for you. And I think that's why this is going to be an intense matchup. I still just have a hard time. Covering Oklahoma this year has been such a roller coaster ride where they come out and prove you wrong in certain scenarios, and then they prove you wrong again the other way. I think, they prove you wrong where you don't think they quite have what it takes against maybe a Michigan or even early season Auburn, what we thought Auburn could be this year. And then, Ole Miss happens, Texas happens. Those kinds of games just kind of get Oklahoma fans where you just start to lose confidence in certain aspects of Oklahoma, because it feels like Oklahoma's losses really fell a lot more on the coaching staff than it was really on the players out on the field. I think in the Texas game, should you have played John Mateer? Hindsight's 2020, but I think we can all say that was probably a bad decision. And then on top of that, not trying to get any sort of run game going against Ole Miss when it was working and it actually got you into the lead, and you completely abandoned it. But then you redeem yourselves with a big win on the road in Knoxville. And so I think this is going to be a tough game. I think Oklahoma puts up a fight for much of the game. I'm really leaning towards Alabama. I think Alabama is able to get this done. I think it just all the signs lead to that. And so it's not that I don't think Oklahoma can't win. I think they can. This is a team that has proven it all season long, really. I think if they were to play at their best, where I think you look at that second half against Tennessee, or you look at, really even the first half against Tennessee, it kind of felt like the defense was playing lights out. The defense was playing their best game. Or maybe you go back to the Michigan game. But even in those games, there were certain aspects from Oklahoma where you just weren't getting their full potential. Go back to the Michigan game, you weren't getting Oklahoma's full potential in the traditional run game. You go to the Tennessee game, and it felt like it took a long time for the offense to get any sort of rhythm. So that's where I kind of lose some confidence in Oklahoma being able to win this game. But it's definitely on the table. I'm gonna pick Alabama. I think I said a different score earlier on in the week whenever I was on Alabama at the Voice of College Football, but I think I'll go maybe a little bit lower scoring than what I had before. I'll pick Alabama. I don't know, 23-17. That might actually be the same score I said earlier in the week, but I'll say 23-17. Alabama gets it done.
Well, or go ahead, Andrew.
I was going to say, you've seen both of these teams this year, so.
Oh, I have.
Yeah, you have.
You have.
Oh, yes, I have. I have seen both these teams this year.
Tennessee has played both these teams, so
yes, and not fared well in either one.
Out of his brain.
Yeah, just trying to get out of my brain, exactly. To Josh's point, I do think it is a lower scoring brain. Holy crap, I can't talk now. Lower scoring game. Sorry about that. Here's what I do wonder, just because I've seen Oklahoma firsthand go into a hostile environment and get a win. Alabama, I have to be honest, it's not anywhere close to as tough of a place to get a win as Tennessee if the team was not as good. The team makes that place tougher, but the fans, the environment, it's not all that good, just to be completely honest. Now, we'll say this. The thing that I think helps out some of these teams on the road that have good defenses, and Oklahoma is certainly one of them, is the fact that when the home team is on offense, they're all quiet. And that's the case with the away team on defense. They can communicate really well. Alabama's offensive line is nothing special. We know the run game is nothing special either. So maybe it's something where you just have to focus on, matching up with those three wide receivers, Horton, Williams, and Bernard in that game. That's something that I think could help out Oklahoma a lot, is just having a focus on that and not so much the run game. The question, though, and Josh alluded to it earlier, is what does this offense look like against Alabama? Because I have not been able to figure out this offense all season long. There's conspiracy theories floating around out there that John Mateer did not actually have surgery.
I think I'm the one that started that, actually.
You're the one that started that. Okay. I don't know if they can formulate anything there. Their run defense at Alabama has been solid this year. And again, I don't trust John Mateer through the air. So I feel like Alabama wins this game, but I'm with Josh. It has to be a lower scoring game if they're going to win.
So big thing for me in this one, it's Alabama's offensive line holding up against the Oklahoma defensive front. Is that a thing Bama's able to do? Bama has struggled in pass protection frequently this season. That's kind of just that offensive line's not great. I know they got a couple guys, and Parker Brailsford's supposed to be a really good center, and then the left tackle Caden Proctor gets talked about as a first round pick all the time. But I guess outside of when he's being a pseudo fullback out there, it kind of feels like he's not the greatest either. That offensive line has not lived up to expectations. I know OU, question about R. Mason Thomas and his availability in this game, questionable, and you got another defensive lineman as well in Jaden Jackson, who may or may not be able to go in this game. So that could impact things, but can Bama's offensive line give Ty Simpson enough time? If you look at Oklahoma's defense, which has been fantastic this season, obviously, but Ole Miss was able to have some success moving the football, and that's obviously a very good offense. Tennessee, it was a lot, missed field goals, turnovers, and that's not to take away from Oklahoma. You still have to make those plays, but Tennessee moved the football well in that game, over 450 yards of offense. Can Alabama, if they protect? Well, I think Alabama, if they do protect it, probably can move the ball some. I don't think they're going to put up a big number. I think OU's defense is too good, and I also think Alabama not being able to run the football effectively this season, I don't see that changing against Oklahoma. And then as I already talked about the pass rush thing, that's where OU, I think, can create problems and get negative plays, turn those into turnovers, and get some stops. But I do think Alabama could find some success offensively if they can just give Ty Simpson enough time and not let OU be living in the backfield the entire game. Other side of the ball, is Bama going to be able to handle a running quarterback? And they've done better about that this season ever since week one. Thomas Castellanos, that was a big issue. But since that point, it's not been as bad. But it really feels like OU offensively, so much of the success does come down to, can Mateer go out and make plays? That's kind of been what that team has been throughout the season. I think if Bama defensively is able to limit Mateer, they probably do enough offensively to cover the spread. But I think it's going to be a tight game for sure. I would take Bama at that number, but I think this thing is fairly low scoring and going to be a really competitive game.
Yeah, and to your point too, with John Mateer, he finally seemed like he found his legs again there against Tennessee and was finally able to break off some big time runs. Even there early in the second half, it still felt like he wasn't quite confident, but then he had designed runs where he took off and he was able to use those legs. And so you finally saw that, and the running game finally seems like they found the right answer in Xavier Robinson and using him and utilizing him properly. So I think if they use that, I think Oklahoma has a really good chance. That's where I think Oklahoma can win this game. It's just whether we have faith that they're actually going to do it or not is really what I think it comes down to.
So I know both me and Josh basically had Bama covering. Tucker, what did you have?
Ooh. What's the spread again? 5.5?
Yeah.
Ooh. I'm going to take Oklahoma to cover, but not to win.
Look, it's a low-scoring game. That could definitely happen. I think we're all kind of in agreement there. It's just, that 5.5 number is a little bit of a weird number.
Yeah. It's going to be right there. I think, what did I say? 17? Yeah.
You had a 6-point game.
About 6 points. Yes. I think barely cover. I think Bama does barely cover, but it is going to be very close, very low scoring too. So smash the under, because I think Oklahoma has hit the under in all but one game this season, if I remember correctly.
A total just 45.5. Could certainly see that in this one going under. To close us out, number 10, Texas at number 5, Georgia, 6:30 p.m. Central Time on ABC. Also a 5.5 point spread here in favor of the Dogs, over under 48.5. So games that Vegas kind of sees fairly similar playing out here. We will start with Josh.
Man, it's massive for both teams, right? Again, another very similar situation where it's not necessarily a playoff eliminator for Texas, but I think any team has to play like that right now. A 9-3 is not going to get you in. And then again, it's basically a cement, a cornerstone to Georgia's season. It puts them in the playoffs pretty much. And so you really have to look at it that way for each team. And I just think that this is going to be one of those, again, another low scoring game. I think it's going to come down to two defenses battling it out. And the weird thing with Georgia, and I mentioned this a little bit ago, is just it feels like they adapt and they find ways to play to their opponent. You saw it against Ole Miss, I believe against Tennessee as well, right? Higher scoring game for Georgia.
Yeah.
Where that's not Georgia football, but they found a way to do it. They find a way to get something going over on the offensive side of the ball. And then you've got games like Auburn where you shouldn't be in such a tight game and you shouldn't be down. And now maybe it took some help from other outside opponents, but we won't get into that. Still, nonetheless, finding a way to grit it out to find a win there in that game. And it's not like they got walked all over by Alabama either. So it's a Georgia team that just finds ways to adapt. I think Gunnar Stockton doing just enough. What is it with Georgia quarterbacks and just being able to do just enough to carry their team to victory? And that's exactly what it seems like for this Georgia team. Texas, on the other hand, has been a very solid and consistent defense, but just hasn't had any sort of consistency on the offensive side of the ball. And that's the part that I just don't trust is the inconsistency on the side of the ball that you should feel best about in this Texas team, because it's a Steve Sarkisian led team and he is the offensive guru. And then on top of that, of course, all the Arch Manning hype coming into the season. I think, again, maybe kind of a mid-scoring game, but I do think it's going to be a defensive battle nonetheless. I'll maybe pick Georgia, a close game, maybe Texas covering the spread, something like 24-20.
Yeah, Josh, all the Georgia quarterbacks dating back to Aaron Murray are basically different versions of the same guy. And I'm not just talking about their play style, but their appearance. Other than maybe Carson Beck. But they all look very similar. I'm with you on the close game. I do think it'll end up being close just because we know what Texas can do on the defensive end. I do expect that to play a part in keeping this game close. I think this is the toughest defense Georgia has faced all season going into this game. But you look on the other side with Texas, like, do you trust Texas's offense against what is kind of a hit or miss Georgia defense? Like, going into the I guess going into that Alabama game, I was thinking to myself, this Georgia defense struggled against Tennessee, but it'll find its way eventually. It's been up and down and all around all season long. I just can't tell what's going to happen with it, but I do think Georgia finds a way to get the win. I do think it has to be a lower scoring game, though. Like, I don't know if the under hits. Maybe it's similar to the Alabama game where it's 24-21 and Georgia is winning, and we're all going to be Jesse Pinkman at the end of this game. They can't keep getting away with this.
I think this could be a really, really fun game. And, it's interesting because conventionally, yes, I would kind of agree. You're probably looking at a lower scoring, but at the same time, I alluded to this earlier when we were talking about Texas. I think that offense is starting to find something in the pass game. The rushing attack is still bad, and they're not going to run the football against Georgia. Georgia's run defense is too good for them to really be able to get much of anything going. But Arch Manning's last couple of games, he's performed pretty well through the year. And really, if you go back to the Florida game, that was sort of the start of him starting to figure things out. He was solid in Red River, was not good at Kentucky. Like, that game went terribly, but also their offensive line got destroyed in that game. But he had a big day through the air against Mississippi State, had a big day through the air against Vanderbilt. I know those doesn't stand out in terms of opponents. Georgia's secondary has not been locked down this year. Dalen Everett's an outstanding corner. I know KJ Bolden's a really good safety. They've had question marks basically everywhere else when you look at that Georgia secondary, and teams have been able to get some shots down the field against them. Ole Miss had a lot of success throwing the football. Tennessee obviously had a lot of success throwing. Alabama had success throwing the ball. And the other thing with Georgia, because I know I talked about Texas' offensive line, Georgia's pass rush on the season has 11 sacks. And they had 3 of them last week against Mississippi State's offensive line. Now, I guess that's, 3 sacks against a bad offensive line. Texas also has a bad line, so maybe that's a sign that Georgia's about to have a really nice day once again in terms of pass rush. But Manning may not be under the same duress that he has been under a lot of this year. I think he might be able to have some success. Texas is kind of the same way. It's a very similar proposition. Now, their defense has been better overall because they're better up front than Georgia is. They're able to get more pressure up front with the guys they have coming off the edge. But Texas secondary also has some deficiencies. Muhammad and Taft, both really good players out there. But after that, it's again, some question marks. And Gunnar Stockton is starting to perform really well at quarterback in terms of hitting some of those plays down the field. That tight end, the group of tight ends is outstanding. Zach Branch is outstanding. I know no Colby Young, but Noah Thomas is starting to emerge as a guy that they can throw to one-on-one on the outside. So I think there's a chance you hit some big passing plays in this game. It just comes down to which offensive line ultimately performs better. Now, I'm going to trust Georgia in that, which is why I think Georgia probably gets it done. But I think Texas can cover that 5.5-point number. It's very close, but I would not be surprised if we get a few more points on the board. I won't say a full-on shootout, but I could see this being a game that's, 31-27, and we're right there inside the number. This feels like it'd be a really good game.
Yeah, I think it's going to boil down to who really wants to keep that season. I guess keep the season alive / for Georgia. Cement your way into yet another college football playoff.
Yeah, I mean, if you're Georgia and you want to go to Atlanta, you probably you have to win this game because obviously they're behind the 8 ball with Bama and Texas A&M, and then if you lose this game, you're behind Texas in the standings at that point.
Yeah, and you need a little bit more to help you out to get to that point as well. So
should be a really, really fun matchup. A couple great games in the SEC in a week where there's a lot of matchups that are kind of so-so. We get 2 high-profile matchups, big-time stakes. Should be a lot of fun to watch and a lot of impact on that playoff, as we talked about earlier in the show. That'll do it for us tonight. If you haven't already, please leave us a like on the video, subscribe to the channel, and turn that notification bell on so you do know when we go live, as well as all of our friends here on the SEC at the Voice of College Football. Thanks to Tucker and Josh. I'm Andrew Miller, and we will see you all next time.
College football is even more exciting when you've got some action on the line, and the games are even better when you're cashing in. And the Voice of College Football is the place to be to get the greatest value. Start with my picks. 75% against the money line, 58% against the spread, and I've got a 40-plus year track record. 11-0 in the college football playoff for me last year against the money line, 8-3 against the spread. And I'm just the warm-up act. Steve Merrill of Wager Talk is our ace in the hole, show stopper. 7 years with the Voice of College Football, over 30 years in the industry. Steve gives us analysis on all the big games, but you can't miss Steve's weekly under-the-radar pick. 28-12 against the spread the last 3 years. You also get picks from some of our top analysts here at the Voice of College Football, including Corey Bratta, Matt Zemek, and Steve Dace. Check out those numbers. Become a YouTube or Patreon member for just $99 per month. Go to the main channel on YouTube, click Join, and then select the betting tier. Do the same thing on Patreon. Make 2025 a winner now.